I'm recording this, Serena. Oh, he's good.
We are going to key in on 23, which has to do with the appointed feasts, the Moadim. And my message today is the prophetic appointed times and the hidden Jubilee. So if you'll open up, we're going to start off taking a look at these appointed times. Okay, the Moadim, found in Leviticus 23. And we have here, starting in verse 1, it says, Yah spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feasts of Yah, which ye shall proclaim to be holy, convocations. Even these are my feasts. Notice who they belong to? They belong to Him, right? Starts off with the Sabbath. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of Yah in all your dwellings. These are the feasts. Then it goes on to give the annual feasts. All right. Now these feasts are Moadim. That means appointed times. Okay, appointed times, and they are edots in the Torah. There are nishmatim, which are the judgments. There are adot, which are the witnesses or the testimonies, and there's the hukim, which are, we'd say, ordinary or regular, everyday things like the wearing of tzitzits and beards for men and the mezuzah on the door and those sorts of things. All right? Just regular, ordinary things, is the hukim, you might say. But we're going to focus in on these edot, these things that are testimonies or witnesses. Okay? What are they testifying of? See, that means there's something that they're telling. They stand for something, all right? They stand for something. They are witnesses of something. All of these feasts are adults, all right? Now, imagine if you lived in the BCs. Imagine if you lived in the BCs before Yeshua's birth, before he had come, and you had a revelation that these appointed times, these adult, these testimonies, were speaking of some spiritual truth, some appointment in history. And you might think to yourself, and I'm sure you would, we all would, we'd be going, Passover. Now I know this is about a past event that took place when my forefathers were taken out of Egypt and they were told to put blood on the doorpost, and they ate lamb and they ate bitter herbs and unleavened bread. But this is testifying of something. This is a witness of something. So what is it? What is this going to be? What event in history is this testifying of? The lamb, blood, coming out of Egypt. I wonder what this means. See, if you were in the BCs looking forward, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know how all this was going to fall into place. You would look at Shavuot and say, well, there's something to this. It's not just the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai for my forefathers. There's something else that this represents. I wonder what it is. Okay? We would do that. We, in time, are doing that about the fall feasts. But at one point in history, people were doing it about all the feasts. Okay? now, in retrospect, after the coming of Yeshua, we see that he's brought a fullness to the spring feasts. Because it was Passover, he was the Passover lamb, and the unleavened bread, leaven represents sin in the scriptures. He is the unleavened one. And all of these things represent something that he did. Okay? And there's more to it than that as well. Okay? We're going to take a look at a number of things with these feasts. The historical event that took place, the parashah that's being read at that time, because there's a layer to that as well. What we're reading in the parashah relates to what these testify of. Okay? Then, what Yeshua did, or what took place in history at the first century, okay? What's been going on in the time past, or excuse me, the time after Messiah's coming, okay? And then there's also the experience that goes on in your individual life. For each one of these things, they stand for some spiritual experience that you are having as a believer, okay? So there's all kinds of layers to this. These things are pregnant with meaning. They are witnesses of some great truths, okay? So I want to talk about this and just go through the number of these things. As we're celebrating Passover, what is the book we're reading? It's Leviticus. Why Leviticus? You think, well, this is the beginning of the year. Why are we starting with the third book of Moses? In the book of Leviticus, the language that's being used, sprinkle, guilt offering, atonement. These words are all through the book of Leviticus. It's all about sacrifices for sin. Right? And what's happening? The Passover lamb comes right on time in history at the appointed time. And he is the Passover lamb. Behold the lamb who takes away the sins of the world. The Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. He was introduced by John the Baptist. All right? What is your experience? Well, that's when you and I came to the cross. We came to salvation. We came to the knowledge that we needed Messiah, and the blood of the Lamb needed to be applied to our lives. Okay? Easy enough. All right? And the same thing is true about unleavened bread and first fruits. It's the passion. It's the death. It's the burial. It's the resurrection. Yeshua did these things. He was those things right on time. Okay? The passing through the waters. I wonder if they thought, I wonder what this means. I know my forefathers passed through the waters, but what's going to happen in the future about first fruits passing through the waters? Well, Messiah rose up from the heart of the earth, through the waters of the earth. And it's a representation of your renewal as you are water mikvah. When you go through a mikvah and you go through the process of renewing, that's your first fruits. That's your personal experience. Your unleavened bread experience, why is it for 7 days? Gee, I wonder why he appointed 7 days. What does that mean? What is 7? 7 is the number of completion. It represents a lifetime. As you have to work out your salvation, you have to work it out. It's your sanctification. So you have a picture of the death, the burial, and the resurrection with Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits. And your personal experience is your salvation, your sanctification, and your renewal. Wow. Okay? Shavuot. Shavuot comes. It's the giving of the Torah at Sinai. But what is the book that's being read? It's Numbers. But see, Numbers isn't called Numbers in Hebrew. It's Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness. Okay? In the wilderness. All right? But there's something else about this word, Bamidbar. It contains the word for word. Debar. Debar is in that word. All right? Now, it's about a going out. Because in Numbers, what was happening historically, Numbers 10, chapter 1, it says, Yah spake unto Moses, make you 2 trumpets of silver. Of a whole piece shalt thou make them, and that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly, and for the journeyings of the camps. At that point in time, after their Sinai experience, they were going out. The camps were moving out. Also in chapter 13, verse 1, we read this. And Yah spake unto Moses, saying, Send you men, that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel. So there was a going out after Sinai, after the Shavuot experience. And what happens in the first century? When the Holy Spirit comes upon the 120, the gospel message goes out to the world. You see the parallel? Go out, Yeshua said, to the world with this message, this good news. And at that point in time, that's when they were empowered, and that's when it began to spread. Okay? What is your personal experience? Well, it's your Holy Spirit baptism, which is a separate event from your water baptism, your water mikvah. It's the time when you are empowered with the power of the Holy Spirit. And you're given the gifts of the Spirit as described by Shaul in 1 Corinthians 12. Okay? An outpouring of the Spirit. You have your Pentecost experience. Okay? But what are you supposed to do during this time? That, Messiah's not here physically. He said he'd always be with us by his Spirit. Yes. All right? But where are we right now? We're in Bamidbar. We're in a wilderness. Okay? And where are we supposed to stay in order to stay grounded in the truth? The bar. The Word. You got to stay in the Word. You stay in the Word. See that? Because this is what we have. This is his love message to us. His guidance for us during this time of wilderness between his first and second coming. Oh yes, his Spirit is with us, and he's given us his Word. We need to stay in it. Bamidbar, in the Word. Okay? All right. Now, the time between Shavuot and Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, is a 4-month agricultural period. It's 4 months. Okay? Why 4? I wonder what that stands for. What is this testifying of? It testifies of something. It's a witness to something. A future event. What is 4? Well, turn to Numbers. Chapter 14. 4. 40. How long were they in the wilderness? 40 years. 40 years, right? For every day. Numbers 14. Look at this. Verse 33. And your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. After the number of the days in which ye search the land, even 40 days, each day for a year, shall ye bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and ye shall know my breach of promise. Their wilderness was 40 years. You have 4 months between Shavuot and Yom Teruah. Now, I'm going to tell you something. About this word year. In Hebrew, it's the word shana. And the word shana, there's more to it than just the word year. Okay? It's a period of time. It is an age. It can also be applied to the Jubilee period. The Jubilee year. Okay? Yeah. So you can take, how many Jubilees do you get out of 2,000 years, by the way? You get 40. 40 times 50 is 2,000. So we're in our 40 years. This is prophetic. Everything that was done to the forefathers is prophetic for us. So here, let me insert this and see what we have. And your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 Jubilees, and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. After the number of the days in which ye search the land, even 40 days, each day for a Jubilee, shall you bear your iniquities, even 40 Jubilees, and ye shall know my breach of promise. All right. We're supposed to be in the Word and preparing for the Feast of Trumpets. Preparing for the next appointment. The next appointment is the second coming. Because that's what comes with the Feast of Trumpets and the fall feasts. Okay? All right. We're in the dark to a certain degree concerning the coming feast because they haven't happened yet. All right? We have some light, but we don't know exactly how it's going to play out. Just like the forefathers in the BCs didn't understand how Passover and unleavened bread and first fruits and Pentecost were going to take place. They had no way of knowing. Okay? Hints only from prophecy. But I'm going to tell you, Yom Teruah is the least spoken of. There's very little said about the Feast of Trumpets in the Scriptures. Okay? You find it in Leviticus 23, where it simply says to blow the shofar. It doesn't say much about it. It's a holy convocation. All right? Leviticus 23, verse 23 and 4. 24 says, "Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, in the first day of the month, shall you have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation." That's not a lot of information, is it? Okay? I'm going to submit something to you. If you'll turn to Psalm 81. Take a look at Psalm 81. Look forward and give you some insight into why it is not mentioned very often. Yom Teruah is the hidden day. The Feast of Trumpets is hidden. And I think there's Jewish tradition that talks about why it's hidden. It's hidden from the enemy, so he won't know the exact coming of the day of Yah. They say that. That's kind of a commentary. Psalm 81, and it's verse 3. It says, "Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed on our solemn feast day." But let me give you a better rendition of that. "Blow the shofar on the new moon at the hakeseh," the covering, leading to our solemn feast day. You might see some translations that say full moon, but it's not a full moon. The new moon is the beginning of the month. So this is the hidden day, the day that is hidden, as it says in Psalm 81 in the Hebrew. Okay? Hakeseh, leading to our solemn feast day. All right? In our period, after Messiah's coming, hearing the voice of the Spirit for your generation is hearing the shofar. The shofar is different with each generation. There has been restoration going on for the past 500 years, and the shofar has been different in those ages. Martin Luther heard something different. What he heard was a call to grace. It was a call to not a salvation by works. He was a monk of the Catholic Church, and he had a revelation that it's by grace that you're saved, that it's a gift that's given to us, that you can't earn it. And that began the Reformation. All right? We've had all sorts of reformations that have been taking place. The Anabaptists were big on immersion and not sprinkling. You know, the Catholic Church had changed it to sprinkling, right? And there's been so many different shofars that have been blowing at different seasons. 100 years ago, it was the Pentecostal movement. At the turn of the 1890s to the 1900s, there was the Pentecostal movement. What we have going on right now is a different shofar. It's a call to coming back to Torah. And people are hearing that call. They're hearing the shofar in their generation. And in our life, we have to do a self-examination, because that's what Rosh Hashanah is. It begins the 10 days of awe. We are preparing now for the coming of the Messiah. Eventually, it's going to be something he fulfills completely, physically. But we're actually experiencing these feasts now. Okay? Yom Kippur, in the past, was all about the goats. Right? Leviticus 16, all about the sacrifices, the goats. For us, in the future, it's the day of judgment. Jewish tradition teaches that this is the day when you're going to stand before your Maker. It was the one day when the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, the only day of the year, when he was able to do that. He's the only presence, the only light there was the Shekinah glory. Face to face, he was with the Almighty. We are going to be face to face with the Almighty when the Day of Atonement has its fulfillment. When Messiah is here. It's the Day of Judgment. Okay? Tabernacles. All right. How do the feasts end? How does the parashah relate to the ending of the feasts? Turn to Deuteronomy. Chapter 31. This is where it gets a bit interesting. If I was boring you up to this point, I don't think you're going to be bored after this. Deuteronomy 31, verse 3. Look at this. It says, Yah, your Elohim, he will go over before you, and he will destroy these nations from before you, and you shall possess them, and Joshua, he shall go over before you, as Yah has said. This is the time at the end of Moses' life. And how many years did he live? Look at verse 2. He said unto them, I am 120 years old. And then he appointed Yehoshua to take them in. This is how the book of Moses, the books of Moses end, with Joshua being appointed to take them in. This is what relates to tabernacles. Because it's when Messiah comes. This is the beginning, the end of Deuteronomy, and the beginning of the book of Joshua. It's when Messiah is here. You see this? This is the parashah. It tells us that Yehoshua was the one that's going to take us in. In other words, it's not just the written word. You can't just go with the written books of Moses. It's not enough. You need to have Yehoshua to take you into the promised land. And it's right here at the end of Deuteronomy. But interestingly, it says he says, I'm 120 years old. What is 120? You see, there's a way of interpretation called, it's Gezerah Shiva, where you take a look at common terminology and see where else it is in the Torah to find out what the Torah is telling you. So what is 120? Turn to Genesis chapter 6, verse 3. Genesis 6, verse 3 is where it says, I will not always strive, my spirit will not always strive with man. For his days shall be 120 shana. Oh, there's that word again. His days shall be 120 years. His days shall be 120 jubilees. After the time of man, 120 jubilees, which is 6,000 years, it's Yehoshua who comes to tabernacle with us. Okay. Hang on. Hold on to that thought. We're going to come back to that in a moment. I want to show you how the Gospels also relate to the feasts. Because in the Gospels, we have all the feasts embedded. Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits. Where do we read about these things? In the Brit Hadasha. The death, the burial, and the resurrection are all in the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There's the testimonies that these things stand for. We're seeing the fulfillment of it in the Gospels. What about Shavuot? The coming of the Holy Spirit. Hey, that's the book of Acts. And then the epistles. There it is. How about trumpets? Trumpets. Matthew, chapter 24, verse 31. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and he shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heaven to the other. 1 Thessalonians, chapter 4, verse 16. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trump of Elohim. And the dead in Messiah shall rise first. How about that? It's all there. How about Revelation, chapter 8? That's all about the 7 trumpets. There you have it. Trumpets were all through the Brit Hadasha. Right? How about atonement? There's 2 books that are written, that are dedicated to Yom Kippur. One of them is in the Talmud called Yoma. And the other one, find in the New Testament. It's the book of Hebrews. All about the priestly responsibilities, all about atonement. There's your Yom Kippur. Okay? What about tabernacles? Well, tabernacles is in a few places. John 1:14. And the Word was made flesh and what? Dwelt. Tabernacled. Right? It also says in John 14:2. Look at this. And this is an interesting thing because even though we're in the wilderness, He was with them, wasn't He? His presence was there in the Ark of the Covenant, in the wilderness. In John 14, verse 2. How fast can you flip pages? In my Father's house are many mansions, and this is in the Aramaic, it's the word awana. All right? Interesting, because that's the dwelling of Yah in the believer. Look at verse 20. Look at verse 23. If a man love me, he will keep my words, and my Father will love him, and we will come into him and make our awana, our abode, with him. Isn't that something? He goes and he prepares a place for us, which is the dwelling place for us to dwell. But also, he says, I mean, the very same Aramaic word is used for the place inside of you, where he comes to dwell. He tabernacles with you while you're in the wilderness. All right? And there's more. Back at 1 Thessalonians, the very next verse that we just read speaks of tabernacles. After 1 Thessalonians chapter 4:16 comes verse 17, and this is what it says. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord, tabernacling with him. And finally, in Revelation, at the end of the book, we see it. Revelation chapter 22, I believe it might be 21. Yep, 21 and 22, but go to 22. Chapter 22, 21:3. Mess you all up. Revelation 21:3 says this. I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of Elohim is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them and be their Elohim. How about that? How about that? So it's all through. All the feasts are contained in the New Testament. You see that? All right. Now let's go and talk about a Jubilee. What is a Jubilee? What is a Jubilee? A Jubilee is a time of release. It's a time when debts are canceled. It's a time when, all sorts of good things happen. If you owe anybody any money, you don't owe it anymore. Wouldn't it be nice to have a Jubilee in this country? Real nice, wouldn't it? Take a look at it. Look at it. Chapter 25. And we're reading verse 9 and 10. It says, Then shall you cause the trumpets of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day of atonement, shall you make the trumpet sound through all your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a Jubilee unto you. All right? Yeshua, when he came in after the 40 days in the wilderness, how about that? 40 days, and then he came in and he read this portion in Isaiah 61. Take a look at it. Let me talk about this. This portion in Isaiah 61 speaks of a Jubilee, which, by the way, Messiah is the personification of. He is the Jubilee. When Messiah shows up, it's a Jubilee.